Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we have a brilliant presentation by our esteemed faculty members, Tamira McGillivray and Cindy McKean, titled Astrocartography, Your Story Around the World. And lastly, if you wish to view our current class, workshop and webinar offerings, please visit KeplerCollege.org. And without further ado, let's get into the video.
So I'm happy to introduce Cindy McKean. Cindy was born with a love for adventure and the sciences. Always open to the realms beyond horizons, her experiences in other countries and cultures have broadened her metaphysical knowledge and deepened her understanding of the esoteric realm. Before becoming a full-time astrologer, Cindy was a physician and clinical research director at Weill Cornell Medical College. Her innovations in the medical field are still utilized. When she moved to her Pluto line, which we're going to hear more about today, her whole life changed. She launched a full-time esoteric business and soon after was invited to present astrology on TV, newspapers, national magazines, radio, and podcasts. Astromapping is a passion of hers that she always uses when deciding on major moves and short travels for herself, her family, and clients. She co-created Meteor Cosmo Maps, an astromapping software that can be seamlessly used across all your devices, no matter what operating system. Cindy completed her advanced diploma and AstroMapping Certificate with KeplerCollege. Woohoo! She is also certified in astrocartography through Continuum, the Jim Lewis Legacy Foundation. She can be found at theoracles.com. We'll put a link in the chat box. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Tamira McGillivray, who's been a long-standing faculty member, former president of KeplerCollege, and is kind of like has a historical memory of Kepler that's wonderful. So you can pop some questions in the chat box or the Q&A box, because Tamira will be able to answer questions on astromapping, the Astrocartography Certificate, and KeplerCollege. Tamira holds a BA in East-West Traditions and Astrology through KeplerCollege and a PCG in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology through the University of Wales. She's NCGR Level 3 certified, the past president of the San Diego chapter of the NCGR organization, and she's a certified astrocartographer, also with Continuum. Tamira is not only an instructor at KeplerCollege, but also the coordinator for the AstroMapping Certificate and the treasurer on the Board of Trustees. Tamira has a professional astrological practice dedicated to connecting ancient wisdom to the modern world through astromapping, speaking engagements, workshops, and one-on-one consultations. As a meditation teacher, Usui, Karuna, Reiki, and Holy Fire Master, she studied with Dolores Cannon as a PLR quantum healing practitioner, level 2, and an RYT yoga teacher. Tamira is dedicated to using a variety of methods and energy techniques to meet her clients' individual needs. And her website is navigatingthestars.ca. And she also holds a regular meditation group called the Inner Circle. And if you want to know more about that, I'm sure that we'll have some links that we can share with you. So without any more of me speaking, I am very happy to turn over the webinar to Cindy and to Tamira.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It is great to see everyone here. This is a subject that Cindy and I are super passionate about. Cindy has helped me with the certificate. She's an integral member of that certificate, not just the one class. She's actually developing more advanced classes for the AstroMapping Certificate as well. So I just wanted to say hi while she gets ready.
This is absolutely one of those things that I live, breathe, eat, sleep. I've always loved astromapping in general. So here's an image of, this is how our world does move under our lines. We have to remember this natal chart is a snapshot of the time and location that we were born. And this is something to keep in mind in the future. We really get into these things in the class. Today, we're going to do some more introductions. We're not going to keep it as long, though. Thank you, Lori, for the wonderful introductions you gave us. And we're gonna have to talk a little bit about in Mundo versus Zodical when we're doing astrocartography. We'll give you 3 case studies that we do. Personally, my favorite one is the rectification and how you could use astrology as just another layer of rectification. It's amazing. And we're going to talk about a couple of our online communities pretty quickly, the remote activation magic that you could experience if you enroll in AM 100. And then it's question time. Speaking of questions, we'll occasionally ask the viewers questions, but most of your questions will be answered after the presentation. And upcoming courses, we have some this summer. And of course, next year, we're going to share that with you. And my course in the summer, AM 100, that is Astrocartography for Beginners. It starts on July 27th. That's 5 consecutive Saturdays. And we have exciting new classes coming up. We just increased the enrollment, by the way, for my class because it was starting to get full. So this is me. I'm a Taurus sun, Leo rising, and a Sag moon. And yes, I was going to travel a lot, especially with that Sag moon. You would think, you know, with all the fixity, the main fixity in my chart, I wouldn't. But I have a lot of moving elements or elements that indicate moves in the chart. That's one thing that we will cover in the class. And I probably visited almost close to 30 of my lines. And I've lived there. When I say I lived, I mean I've held residency permits in 8 different countries outside of the United States. I was born and raised in America. And I've traveled or moved a lot, either for education, work, later on my husband, just opportunities. And when I live somewhere, I live among the locals. Out of all my moves that I've had, and just in the past 15 years, I think we had like 12 moves in the past 15 years, which is a lot, over 3 different countries and 5 different regions with the United States. I think 11 different cities, but I always live among the locals. Only twice have I lived in expatriate communities. So I like just immersing myself. That's part of the astrocartography of it. I do eat, sleep, breathe, live with my astromapping. And I use it when I decide major moves or short travels for myself, my family, my clients. So, and I'm very happy to be here. I have Jupiter and Chiron in my 9th house. I'm always seeking education, by the way. I'm very happy to be working with Tamira. Tamira, I'm going to head it over to you.
Oops. All right, that was fast. No. Okay, well, I just realized when Lori had to read all that information that maybe I should shorten my bio a little bit. That was a lot of information. But just like Cindy, I really do love astromapping. I take it in a little different direction. Obviously, I know how to astromap as well, but I like doing local space or compass astrology, which is where you study how you project your planets out into your environment and using that, you know, in a way of, well, reflection. How am I reflecting my planets out there? What feedback am I getting? And I really love doing that. So that's kind of my area of expertise, is the compass astrology. And of course, I love all astromapping. So here we are developing this really great certificate so that when you take the certificate, you finish the certificate, you know you are really well grounded in astromapping and that you can hang your shingle out. You can say, yes, I'm an astromapper. I've had not only the theory, but the practice of it as well, which I think is super important. And every course in Kepler is based on that idea that, yes, we have lots of theory, but we also need to practice what we're learning. So that's where the practicums come in place. Thanks, Cindy.
And you are a Gemini with a Cancer rising Leo moon.
I am. This is true. Yes.
So here we are. We're ready to dive in.
Ready to dive in. So really, this is going to be like a conversation that we're going to have as we're looking at these charts. But one thing that I did want to say, Cindy, before we start, is that, you know, astrocartography can be used by any kind of astrologer. So, you know, if you're an Eastern astrologer, you're doing Jyotish, or you're doing, you know, Hellenistic astrology, or you're doing a really super, maybe evolutionary or a modern take on astrology. Astrocartography is more like a technique. It's like a mapping where the how you get there, what the planets are providing, what they're projecting, what they're doing in the chart is completely up to you. So you can come to astrocartography from any branch of astrology and utilize it. And I just wanted people to know that, because I think some people think that astrocartography is astrology, but it's not telling you how to do your astrology. It's letting you use your tools and develop your tools, and then have this really great product or mapping, like Cindy likes to say, it's shorthand, you know, of the chart all across the world, where we can look at, you know, that natal chart and see how you project all of these different selves that we have. You know, we have all these different parts, these moving parts, and yes, you need to create symmetry within them and understand how they're working together. But when you bring one of those planets into the spotlight, how does that change the dynamics of all the planets? That's what I think is really super interesting. And as Cindy and I have really been working hard to show you here as we come into it, that it tells our story at a very deep level. So you've got the chart and you've got a really great story, but it's amazing what astrocartography adds in depth of understanding of how feet on the ground. That's what I like to say, feet on the ground. You know, this great, beautiful blueprint that we thought, oh, we'll come in, we'll incarnate with this beautiful plan. And then you get your feet on the ground and you're like, what? You know, how am I supposed to accomplish that? And that's what astrocartography does for us. At least that's what I think it does. Hey, Cindy?
Oh, for sure. It's definitely it's like a fill-in dimension, but not just a fill-in. It does tell you all of the story, not just of your chart, but of a location. And you don't even have to necessarily travel to those locations in order to really see that. So that's what I really love about it. And the other thing I started to experiment with recently was, especially when there was this eclipse on April 8th in the United States, and I made it a mission to travel to my eclipse line where my Uranus IC was. As a matter of fact, it happened to be where I was born. So there was a sense of, you know, just trying to really stimulate that even in my natal chart. And I see that you could actually do that in other places, but you could play around with how the planets are lined up in the sky at the time of the eclipse and how the resultant manifestations start to come in your life. And I like to say that sometimes the way that the astrocartography works, well, it's supposed to work instantly. As soon as you get to a location, you should feel it. But, you know, they say wherever you move, you take yourself with you. In other words, a lot of us have baggage, or we went through something that's really major, or we just want to get away from something, and we're going to carry that in our emotions. So sometimes it might take up to a whole solar cycle. We'll get into more of that when we start, when you're into the classes. But it is really almost like the key answer. If you start in astrology, I would highly recommend that you start reading a bit of astrocartography with it. And the astrocartography essentially is specifically where planets were conjunct the angles anywhere in the world. So that would be the meridian, the MCIC, or the horizon, the ascendant, descendant. And well, we're going to get into the story, so I'll move on to the next slide. And I borrowed this slide, by the way, I kind of modified it from the previous presentation that we've done with KeplerCollege, and I think Misty will add the link for that there. This one is another one that I borrowed from that same presentation, but I want to just show you what we're going to be talking about today, mostly the astrocartography in regards to relationships. And relationships could cover a lot. So business relationship, like Arron Rodgers, for instance, and love and partnership, as well as rectification, which we could see both of in Lindsay Lohan's rectified chart. It's an amazing story once you start to add the astrocartography to it. And in our real life person, meaning not a celebrity or someone I knew, one of my clients, he's okay. This is a public thing where we're going to also bring the compass astrology into it. And of course, with astromapping, you just don't look at the map. You have to look at the charts. That is the natal chart, the relocated chart, and you have to do mundane interpretations with them. Look at the country or the place, the location, the culture, the situation of the place. I mean, there's a lot of layers to learn, but oh my goodness, is it so robust and accurate. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was the difference between the Mundo and the Zodical technique in astrocartography. As a rule, we use Mundo. That's what Jim Lewis started with. And there's a very good reason. And let me give you a little bit of an astronomy lesson here. So we have our beautiful Earth there that is spinning. And there's the axis, the imaginary axis that it's spinning on, which would have been the celestial north and south pole. And when we want to look at the celestial equator, we draw that in, and we know that that's the celestial equator simply because it is 90 degrees away from the North Pole. And we could see that a little bit easier if we make a little crosshair there. That's what we use in astrocartography. Why? Because if we're going to be using the ecliptic, and the ecliptic is the geocentric point of, from the geocentric point of view, it's the path traveled by the sun on its apparent path around the Earth, that magical dome in the sky, right? But we don't travel. I mean, the sun doesn't travel around the Earth. We travel around it. The difference between the ecliptic and the celestial equator is 23 degrees and some change. There's an axial tilt. That's part of the reason when you look at a zodiacal chart that you don't really see that in that chart. That's why you're going to see a difference with where the lines are. It's where the planets are in space and project onto the Earth. Whereas the zodiacal chart, it only represents one measurement. That's the planet's longitude projected onto the ecliptic. So with the regular chart, all we use is a bit more of a flat or a 2D representation. I mean, it's 2D if you look at the map and you print it on paper, you look on screen. But if you step outside and you start to look and you start to correlate that, you could really see the 3D of it. The Mundo, on the other hand, it factors into declination, which was that 90-degree angle. And you could see that 23-degree shift. It measures the planet's latitude. And we're also looking at right ascension. So that is what we're using. And this is what we're using throughout all of our presentations and all throughout Kepler. And just in case you didn't know, you remember how I was saying it's a shorthand? You could actually take a glance at a zodiacal or a Mundo chart. The Mundo here is on the left, the zodiacal is on the right. And just at a glance, you could tell which one is which by pretty much, I mean, there's one telltale thing, but you could look at another thing too. And I'll show you in this, we have a vortex. Every map has a vortex. That's where the planets kind of meet around the poles. And rarely do things line up on that solar plane on that same exact declination there. So they're going to cross at different points. And if you look at the zodiacal map, it's not going to have that. It's going to converge all at the same place. The other thing is that if we look at the ecliptic over here on the Mundo map, the planets on the zeniths are kind of not exactly on it. Like this one, I just took a snapshot of Lindsay Lohan's astrocartography chart, and she does have a Mars that's out of bound. And we could see that in Mundo, where we would never see that in the radial chart. We could see in the little info boxes that we type up, but imagine we could look at it at a glance. Yet Here on these zodiacal, it's exactly on the ecliptic. Again, things don't line up just like that on that solar plane. The other thing is, and maybe I might have to try, let me see if I could zoom in. I could. So it shifts the planet. So Pluto especially is going to be a planet that is shifted quite a bit. You could see over here in the Mexico region that there's 3 lines over there. Yet if we look at the zodiacal, we're missing that extra element because Pluto had moved so much. And if we're looking at a Arron between, this looks like Venus and Saturn, and it's almost right next to Florida in the Mundo chart, but it moves away from Florida there. So it is a whole lot more accurate to be using the Mundo. We'll talk more about it in the classes too, especially in the more advanced classes or even in the intermediate classes. So, the vortex. Oh my goodness, those are areas of super high energy. I wouldn't really recommend that you go there because it's just so intense, so harsh. I mean, if you think that you can handle a hurricane or a tornado on your own, and you're a daredevil and you want to go there, go at your own risk. I
was saying to Cindy that now everyone's going to rush to these points because they're going to want to feel that energy. And I see a road trip coming. I think we should actually travel there and have a live presentation from that place. I think it would be a riot. I mean, if you're going to go run yourself into the middle of an eclipse, surely you're not afraid of a little vortex. Well, I, for one, did not run to I did have a place where I could have gone with the eclipse, but I chose not to because the planet that it was going to amplify was one that I have, I mean, I'm, in awe of it. I love the planet. It's a wonderful planet. It's Saturn, but I just didn't want him amplified in that moment of the eclipse. So yes, we have to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I would never go there. However, I wouldn't just go there to feel it in this point.
I think Cindy and I will be going there just to feel it. We got to try it out, Cindy. We got to try it out.
Yeah, we'll prepare. We'll bring the Kepler family there. Maybe that's where they should have the anniversary.
There you go.
So we're going to dive into the charts now. And Arron Rodgers. He is an American football player. So maybe some of you overseas might not have heard of him, but in America, he's pretty popular. Hubba hubba, ladies, huh? Well, he was a Super Bowl champion for Super Bowl 45. And he's known for being brashly outspoken and conspiratorially minded on a range of issues. He also has an out of bounds Mercury in his chart. Sun and Uranus are conjunct. We'll show you in a second. He's also known, he had an estrangement from his family for about 10 years. They're talking again, but it's a little strained. He was on the short list to be the running mate for the 2024 presidential campaign of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He has just since dropped out last week, but I think he chose someone else, like Nicole Hannigan or something from Silicon Valley. But wow, to make it on someone's short list for a presidential candidate, that's like no small feat. And he almost got the Jeopardy host. And everybody on the show from the scene said that he was the most prepared. He's a very smart guy as well. And he's known to be smart since he was younger. He's the quarterback. I mean, that's like the brain behind any American football team. And then in 2023, he got drafted to the Jets. So what's really interesting was that when he played for the Green Bay Packers, and I'm going to move this just so you guys could take a look at his chart even more. This is his natal chart. That's a nice representation of him when he was a baby. But if right before he got drafted, he went on an ayahuasca retreat. So that kind of goes with his Sun and Uranus conjunct each other. I mean, he is a Sag Sun. He is going to think outside the box, no problem. That's not something that most American football players do. There's more of a conventional thinking there. But he went and he got his astrology chart read. So he's totally open and into all this stuff, which is amazing. However, he clearly did not have an astrocartographer involved. Otherwise, we would have tried to intervene and say, you know, New York is not such a good idea if you're going to be moving to the New York Jets. By the way, I really love New York City, so I have a bias in favor for it. I have my Sun MC line over there. But in general, when I'm looking at anybody's chart, you have to remove the bias. So we'll take a look at his chart with that. One of the things that I wanted to really highlight, and by the way, this is a whole science chart. We used Astrology software in order to get this. He has kind of a bucket formation, if you want to use Chiron. I always do. That really attaches to all of these planets in his chart. But you notice how much it's bunched up. Even if you're not looking at Chiron, look how tight he has it. Most of these planets are right above the horizon. They're in the 8th house. And most notably, he has that Saturn and Pluto in his radial chart that are equidistant from the descendant. So we would think that where he was born in Chico, California, that he would have maybe Pluto out west in the ocean, and Saturn would be right on the other side of him, and that Venus would be even further out in the ocean. But let me show you something, and I'm just going to take this little section of his chart and zoom in. One other thing I'd like to mention is I also like to add the UT time, because with American time zone changes, that could get, there's no rhyme or reason with the rules or when they change it and why and how. Every city is different, every state's different, and it's a Rodden rating of a AA. So when we're doing astrocartography, please use only your AA charts, because you could use an A chart too, but timing is everything. To give you some perspective, if the sun in the sky, say that we're closer to the equator on June 21st, that sun, if you're born with it high noon, exactly conjunct the midheaven, in just 1 minute's time, it would have traveled 17 degrees to the west, 17 miles to the west. That's quite a bit. That's why we want to get down to the timing there. So here's his map. We're using Meteor Cosmo maps with this. And he has a lot of descendant lines across the United States, understandably so. You might ask why some of these, like, why is Pluto in one direction and Chiron is in the same direction of all the other lines? And that has to do with declination, as we talked about earlier, whether it's north or south. And we'll talk about that in future classes too. But what I really wanted you to look at is that in this part of his chart, where his descendant is and the equidistance, about 5.5 degrees on either side, you see Saturn and Pluto. But where he was born, and we have this little mile marker over, map marker over here, there's Saturn, but Pluto is not there. And what's even crazier is if we measure it, Venus is 130 miles closer to where he lives than his Saturn line. Again, that's the right ascension and declination that's being factored in. And that Pluto, that's only 5.5 degrees away from his descendant in his chart. Oh my goodness, 830 miles away. Why? Because Pluto's orbit is at such a strange incline to our solar plane. And in the time that he was born, so he was born sometime in the early 80s, it was totally away from that solar plane, out of that 18-degree solar band. I think it entered the solar band around 2018, and it's still there. I don't remember when it's leaving, but you're going to see this in charts. And it was there in the 1930s. So if you do charts for older people, you'll see that Pluto will line up a whole lot more because it was within that solar band again. So here's this relocated chart to Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, by the way, is right over here, and we'll get to it again. But here's his relocated chart to Wisconsin. Again, when we're looking at our astrocartography, we look at the natal, we look at the relocated, we look at the map. And the notable shift is, remember how he had all these planets from the 8th house pretty much down to the 6th, but look at, they all shifted down. The biggest thing is how Jupiter is now on his descendant, but his midheaven changed. So did his ascendant. These are big deals in astrocartography. His stellium moved down from the 8th to the 7th house for using whole signs, and his 5th house has Mars and Venus in it. So you could compare it to the camaraderie that he's had over there and all the success that he's had over there. By the way, if you want to convert your, because if you notice, I did not add the local time there. I just used universal time. You could go to worldtimebuddy.com and you could just type it in and find out. You type in the date and the city and the state or wherever it is in the world, and you could find out the universal time. So this way you have a more accurate relocation. But look at, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Cindy, I was just going to say, but look at that. I mean, for somebody who is looking for growth in their career, that's going to depend on team effort and is going to depend on the relationships that he builds. What a fantastic chart for him to be working with. What a fantastic placement of that relocated chart. And, the Jupiter, or I'm sorry, the Mercury rising is going to give him a little, maybe a little more communication that he usually is doing. We've got the North Node sitting right on that ascendant, which I think is really an interesting piece to this puzzle as well.
Yeah, and that out of bounds Mercury, he was on that team when he started speaking about that conspiratorial minded stuff. And
he does.
He took a stance against the vaccine. And the other thing too is, look at his 5th house. It has Mars and Venus there. He enjoys playing this. This is not a job. This is like, he's getting paid to do what he enjoys there. Yeah. And he has a little bit of the North Node on the other side. That's also going to be playing a factor. But, he goes from this solid Taurus ascendant to a Gemini ascendant. That's going to make him a lot more flexible, nimble, quick. And that really works with his new midheaven in Aquarius, where the Capricorn midheaven would be a lot more structured. This is a lot more thinking on the field. So what a perfect place for him as a quarterback. And we could see that on the map. I mean, it's right there. It is right there.
Yeah, it's like bang on. He couldn't have gotten any closer to his Jupiter line. It's fantastic.
And the team colors are green as well. Green and yellow, green and gold, I believe. So that helps. I mean, the gold is very Jupiter as well. And he has, that little bit of North Node that's in that chart. Maybe he was fated to move there. Maybe that's the natal promise, that he was fated to move to a place where he'd have this type of championship.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the green and gold. I mean, gold is Jupiter, green is Mercury, and the Gemini rising. I mean, it's actually, it couldn't have been more fated. It's absolutely perfect. And I understand, although I'm not a sports person, everyone. I struggle a little bit. My husband's huge in sports. He'd be surprised I was even talking about sports, but I understand that he did really well there. He was like top guy.
And I'm the same with sports. I leave it to my husband, by the way, but this is how exceptional that the astrocartography is, that you could take someone that, we just kind of glance about what is going on in his life, and we could see his story play out around the world, around the States here with him.
Yeah, so it adds depth to the story we're looking at. It's not just about the 7th house. It's going over this place where it's, where he can live his dream, really, that this is his dream job is football. So it provides a place for that. It tells us where he can activate this energy. So what it's doing is it's taking this Jupiter and it is amplifying it where it normally isn't amplified on an angle. It's sitting down in the third house, I believe. So, it's not amplified at all. So what he's done is he's shifted his toolkit and amplified this one particular energy. Now we know that Jupiter is, I believe it's in Sagittarius, isn't it?
Yes.
What's his natal Jupiter in? Sagittarius? Sagittarius, of course it is. So it's in rulership, it's in nice shape, of course, but here we are amplifying it now. So it's not just one of many, sitting there in that little grouping. It actually begins to go, okay, who are we going to amplify? Sit right on that Jupiter line, amplify that energy, and see where that takes our career.
Yeah, this really works.
It really works. Well, I mean, the next stage here that we're going to show you is pretty bizarre. That's what's happened to him.
So speaking of dreams, he moves to his Neptune line in New York, where he got drafted to the New York Jets. And, I wrote about this before he even moved there. And it was interesting because I said he might have some kind of foot injuries or leg injuries. Wouldn't you know it, on that first game, and this is the picture of the actual tackle that it tore his Achilles heel. He was out for the rest of the season, the poor guy. Even though it's a New York City team, they have the stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. It's the MetLife Stadium, if you guys want to look it up. But the notable shifts that we have going on in his chart is that the Neptune on his descendant, and Mercury is kind of close by. It's kind of interesting with Mercury because you will see it in the chart. It's only, I think, like 24 minutes away from his Neptune. And you think that it should be closer together, but that out of bounds Mercury actually adds some space when we see it on the chart, on map rather. His midheaven moved from Capricorn to Pisces. What a change. His ascendant from Taurus to Cancer. Again, another change. And the stellium went from his 8th house to his 6th. And then look at that 5th house. This is no longer fun for him. This is work. Furthermore, he might not have the communication. If we're looking at that Neptune and the Neptune and the Mercury on his descendant, he might not have the communication or the camaraderie that he experienced on the Green Bay Packers. And look at Mars grounded in the 4th house. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot going on of changes where it's like the anti-football. Really, maybe he would have had a better career if he wanted to go there to become a sportscast announcer.
Yeah, it's really taken, the sun is now deep in the bottom half of the chart where he's natally, like his being is used to having the sun above the chart. So now it's sunk down below and, it's not getting the light that it was hoping for, so it's and yes, it's in the house of work. I mean, he's working. Well, he's not working actually right now at all. He's trying to recoup. He's trying to recover. He's in healing mode. So, we could say that 6th house also can, be health. It can be, working on your health. And that's what he's doing. And I agree that Saturn moon in the 5th house, his dream has now become work. He's trying to heal, but he's in his 40s. We were talking about this yesterday. He's in his 40s. He's not a young chicken that's going to come back to, he may rejuvenate, he may get back on the field, but, maybe he won't. Maybe he needs to start thinking about a new career. That's what we were kind of talking about.
Well, so especially since the Uranus half return is coming.
Yeah, exactly. And he has to be careful that he doesn't, with that Uranus half return, that he doesn't do a knee-jerk reaction and, do something crazy because he's got that craziness in his chart with that Uranus. So, the Uranus sun, he could, if he can focus the energy, then yes, he may really be able to pull a good one, and focus that energy on a real career that he can make good money from. But I'm sure he's got to be thinking about it. He's got to be thinking, what am I going to do? I'm in my 40s. Even if he heals, is he going to be able to climb? Probably not. I mean, I'm thinking no. So we're looking at a new career.
Yeah, and remember how so one of the things about Neptune is that it's right. It's kind of, he still has some influence from his Mercury line. If we look at his chart, Mercury is the god that's holding the caduceus. He is going to represent healing, health, but also allopathic medicine. Mm-hmm. If I'm looking at his chart and his maps, especially as a former physician, do I really want to mix and match this allopathic medicine with this Neptune line where he could be totally, non-compos mentis or in a delirium? No, we don't want to do that. I would recommend maybe some unconventional forms of treatment. And thank goodness, maybe this is within him. Maybe it's because, he's on a big team and they have the ability to go outside of typical healing methods, that he's doing acupuncture. He's doing electrical muscle stimulation locally, and he's doing the float pods, which is so Neptunian. So thank goodness he's taking a different, I don't know. I would imagine he's using some allopathic medicine too, but thank goodness he's using a more unconventional method. That is right up Neptune's alley, by the way. But what's really interesting is that this area then would make it so that he, it's kind of slippery. Neptune is hazy. It's vapor. It makes things really slippery and blurry. It's kind of, undetermined type of clarity. And it's on his descendant. So that kind of plays into what's kind of happened to him there. Well, it gets even wilder with the astrocartography, because that team he was playing against was the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo is right there where this other marker is, right between his Mercury and his Neptune lines. And don't forget, in his natal chart, they're only like 24 minutes apart. Why is it that they're so spread far out together? And that's because Mercury is out of bounds. We could use a different example. The Sun and Uranus in his chart are also very tightly together, I think within 13 minutes. And look at how tight they are within each other, because neither of them were, the Sun would never be out of bounds. It defines the ecliptic. And it's rare for Uranus to be out of bounds, but let's pretend that it would be widespread, like you see between Neptune and Mercury there. Well, we talk about natal promise. The player on the Buffalo Bills team who did that tackle and ended up accidentally or unintentionally injuring Mr. Rodgers, you wouldn't imagine this was part of his fate there. He was from nearby his North Node line. Mm. So somebody actively came to him, that's his ascendant, to tackle him. He didn't see him coming. Mm. And look what happened. He had this injury. We cannot make this up. We're not retrofitting this. This is something that I wrote about it ahead of time, where he was going to have this injury. So, I mean, this is something as an astrocartography perspective, you can actually see more richness in the charts.
Absolutely. So I mean, if we're looking for a new career for him or trying to guide him into what else can you do where you're at, Neptune Mercury is not for the faint of heart either. It actually is a pretty powerful combination, and it's more collective in nature. It's when you hear things that move you, that move the collective. It's got this vibration to it that is singing at a much deeper level. And so he could use this energy and create, a broadcaster doing something like that. I mean, it's probably what he's thinking. I mean, I can't imagine that he's not thinking that, or that he hasn't been approached in that way. Or you could ask him to, well, let's see where else we could move you. I just don't think that that he's going to move to another team. I think he needs to move career, and and then, I mean, whether he stays on that Neptune line or whether he moves to someplace like his sun line or even that North Node ascendant down in the Florida section, that might be an interesting place for him to get some feedback and hang out there for a while and see what happens.
He could move to Jupiter, Florida. How about that?
Jupiter, Florida. Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Yeah, Jupiter, Florida. That'd be fantastic, because he's going to get a little bit of feedback from his Jupiter, in that slice between the North Node and the Jupiter. So it's kind of a nice little area that he really might get good feedback. He might be well accepted. There might be the dream career just might be there waiting for him if he loosens up, gets healed, gets away from what he's doing and on to the next level of his career, for sure.
And Tamira, what do you think about it with him and Washington, D.C., especially considering he was on the short list for presidential?
Yeah, I know. I don't know about that. I mean, yes, I think it's interesting. I think that it could be powerful. He could have a really powerful voice. It depends on, how he's going to approach it and what way he's going to go. He does have that real rebellious nature, with that Sun Uranus, but it can be quite genius as well. So if he wants to pull that in, he can sort of tap into that genius level of himself and, and do that as well. Again, that Neptune really can separate him from the rest. And maybe that's why they were looking at him, why they were vetting him for, that political position, because this Neptune on that, when you move it to that angle, it gives it that extra oomph, and that Mercury. So.
Yeah, and especially considering he does have that built-in Sun Uranus outspokenness. Maybe
yes.
we, just do a write-in for Arron Rodgers for president instead of the two candidates that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's great. But the thing that we love about this map is that it tells this deeper level of the story without us having to sort of stretch to figure out what's going on. It's really, he's a football guy. There's a team right over, so even if you didn't, you just knew he was a young football guy. He came to you when he was young and he hadn't had this opportunity yet. You could say, well, the Green Bay Packers, your Jupiter line's right there. I mean, you would guide him there as an astro mapper. So it's not that we're telling the story behind it. And obviously we are, because that's what gives us history on what we can do with mapping. But it's there to tell the story, whether we have heard the story already or not.
And the other thing is, we could also look and tell someone where not to move, for instance. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that he moves along this Pluto line.
No Denver team.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a team in Denver. I feel there must be a team in Denver. Denver does sports stuff.
He might do well in Houston with Chiron on the ascendant, seeing that's the handle of his bucket, but maybe it would be too warm too.
He could, Wendy, but I don't know if that Chiron is really, I mean, it's, not traditionally a handle of the bucket, but it is a standout if you're looking, if you're a Chiron enthusiast. It would be interesting, but I don't know that, is he going to dig that deep? Is it going to be something that, it happens to him and he just doesn't let go of this Achilles heel thing, right? Because that's Chiron, right?
So Achilles heel and Chiron. I mean, how much does that match?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know that that's the best place. I don't know that I would say, hey, that might be a place, unless he was going for some deep healing. What's Houston got, that he can do some healing on that? Do they have some microbiotics that can get in there and heal that thing, or what? There's some deep level of uncovering that would need to happen. And I don't know that he's there. And also the Pluto, I'm not going to send him to his Pluto line. I just don't think that, I mean, you could have a conversation with him and really it could be the place for him to do some deep healing, to do some transformation on himself, to work on change, within not only himself, but in the environment in a political sense. Maybe I might look at that Pluto if he was going to run in politics. Then we might say, what can your platform be, for that particular area of the country. I mean, he's got the Venus, he's got a beautiful Venus on the other end, but he hasn't had good luck with that Venus, with the family. The family has been a struggle for him. So does he go back to the Venus where he's already had this struggle? Or, do you find, you go to Florida or maybe somewhere along that Sun-Uranus line? Yeah, I think they're good things to explore.
That's an excellent point with the Venus, because people generally would be like, oh, move to your Venus line for peace and happiness and love and everything. But he has Venus conjunct his Pluto in his natal chart. So no matter where he goes on his Venus line, that Pluto is always going to be there with the power struggles and the strife that happens there with him. So maybe for him, a Venus line is not always that great. Going back to the Chiron is a teacher and a student. That's another thing he could do if he went down to Houston, is maybe start teaching some of, if they have any football camps there, and how not to get an injury or how to heal from an injury. He could get involved in that if he wants to too. But if he stayed in the New York area, sports casting, if he went, we'd have to determine where, he moves to next. If he wants to live his good life, we would tell him, why don't you go to somewhere along your Jupiter line again, or Jupiter, Florida, right? Since a lot of the sportscasters do go down there. We'd have to look at his goals, of course. None of us talked about Saturn, Uranus, or his sun line, but really these are the big highlights there.
Absolutely. Well, we better move to the next here. We're rolling along in time. So let's take now this is an incredible tool that, we can't, I mean, I guess you could, but we wouldn't want to use rectification for like the 24-hour thing. What we're doing with rectification in astrocartography is fine tuning. It's giving us, you've got an idea of where you're going. Now let's look at the map to see, is this the story that's being played out? Because remember, we can go pretty deep with astrocartography. And
by the way, this is a Lindsay Lohan with her husband. So I had to include a photo there.
Yeah, beautiful.
Beautiful story when you read it.
Beautiful story. Yeah.
I will, just because I don't have this in my notes, it just popped into my head. I remember just reading by chance about her pre-pandemic. It was 2019, and they were talking about celebrity net worth, and she was like worth $500,000. That's despite all the Hollywood, all the fame, all the blockbusters she had. And I was telling my husband, he's like, well, her parents did spend a lot of that money. So, but we're going to talk about money and her status as we talk about her astrocartography. It's like, you can't make this up. I actually have goosebumps as I'm telling you. That's how much I'm into this. So this is her, she's so cute, isn't she? This is her rectified chart. It was rectified by someone named Starkman, and he's done over 2,000 rectifications. So I just want to give the disclaimer that we're not saying that he is wrong. We're saying that we could fine tune a rectification even more than what was done by using astrocartography. So it looks to me like he got very, very close. And we know that this is a rectified chart. By the way, this is Astro Gold software. If you have a Mac, Astro Gold is a good way to go. And I use Placidus because then you could look at his link in the wiki Astro. And I think Misty put that up. But one of the other things is, how do you find out if it's not a sunrise? Like, if some people, when they do a chart without a time, they'll do it at sunrise or they'll do it at high noon. And, if you're using a Placidus or a Coke, the sun would show up on the ascendant for sun rising. It would show up on the midheaven for high noon, but you could also look it up for the sunrise, sunset at timeanddate.com. And you put the city, the state, and it happened to be 5:23 a.m. in her period. Again, these daylight and standard saving time you have to watch it. And high noon was at 12:56, but he has it at 4:40. So we know he's probably used a lot of her transits. And it's the Rodden rating is DD, dirty data, which means that he used a lot of news events and things that were published, but maybe some things were conflicting as far as the news is concerned. But I mean, if you've done over 2,000 rectifications, obviously this guy knows what he's doing. So using astrocartography, we rectified the chart at 4:20. Now, the notable shifts is, if we look at Lindsay Lohan, she's had a tumultuous relationship with her parents. She's openly said this in interviews, and she has an out of bounds Mars that does make that connection with her moon. But if we look at the other shifts, her midheaven moves from Pisces to Aquarius, to 29 degrees Aquarius of all things. So maybe that, I kind of thought Pisces fit her more, but if you look at her erraticness in her past with her, she was known as a wild child, right? So maybe that fits that 29 degree Aquarius. And especially if we move the chart, the other notable shift is that her ascendant does put that Jupiter, kind of amplifies the power that it has on her angles. It's almost like a direct degree hit, but it's square. Squares aren't always bad, by the way. She's obviously used it to the best of her ability. And she has Venus in the 440 chart that is after her part of fortune, but you'll see that in the 420 chart, it's before her part of fortune. So maybe instead of using love to find her fortune, she followed, love came with her fortune. And she has Uranus closer to the descendant when we're looking at her 420 astrocartography rectified chart. And of course, she has Chiron that is closer to her ascendant. So it's really interesting because Lindsay moved quite a bit. She's moved to London, and then she's moved to the United Arab Emirates. But let's look at her American chart first with the 440. And a couple of things here that I wanted to point out. I just showed you the two circles. If we're looking at where she was born, she doesn't have any lines there. And if we're looking at Los Angeles, where, she made it in big time movies, right? And that's Mars on the midheaven, and she has node, that's her north node, that's right there. Well, Mars on the midheaven is going to have a very rapid upward mobility, but it's not the line that's the big one for fame. The sun would be, Jupiter would be. And again, with her having no lines in proximity to where she was born in the Bronx, that, she's too much of a personality. She's too beaming to not notice her. My husband's former law partner represented her father, and he met her when she was like 8 or 9 years old, right before she was getting into modeling. And he was coming back and he's like, she is as cute as a button. She's always smiling. She's bright. She has all these beautiful freckles on her. When someone has that kind of look, very likely there's some kind of angular line where they're born. So we could keep that in mind with the rectification using the astrocartography. And if we do the 420 using the astrocartography, and by the way, this is Astrogold maps, you could see that let me just circle the areas. It's even better. So where she was born, she has two lines there. She was having that tumultuous relationship with her parents, especially of all things, is that she really wanted to quit school and they forced her to stay in. Not really a horrible thing to do to somebody, but the rebelliousness of Uranus against the teaching, learning of Chiron. And that sense of feeling maybe wounded or let down by her family and just wanting just the rebelliousness overall. Maybe she wasn't really aligned. And in Los Angeles, what we get instead, remember I was talking about the sun and fame? And the node is still there. And Mars is kind of far away. Yeah. And interestingly, we want to talk about this in her story. She has a pawn with Venus and Saturn nearby Florida. I don't know if these stories are true. You could read these on the internet. It's not verified. I didn't hear I didn't see any interviews where she shared anything like this, but there are stories where, she was handed to older men, and that could be the Saturn, the older men, her being beautiful to them, the Venus, or it could be living in a gilded cage. It's also interesting to note that her husband, and you'll find this with these beautiful love stories between people, their circles overlap until they finally line up. And of all the universities that he could go to in the world, he ended up going to university right nearby her crossing. So, and he protects her, he takes care of her. That's her love, right? That's protecting her. So it's interesting that, we could look into these things with somebody's story with the astrocartography. And finally, and this ties in a little bit with her story, her Mars line moves over Utah. And after she got married, she did a collaboration movie with her husband. And he would show up on set, and she said, I love it when he's there behind the scenes. I feel protected. And, it was filmed in Utah. That's her Mars line. That's her shield, her warrior, right?
Warrior. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that it's an interesting story, and Lori, or I'm sorry, Cindy has a story like this. I have a story like this. I've talked to clients that have this story. Somebody that's really relevant in your life, that's really has an impact. Oftentimes, it's almost like you're moving through time, because even though you weren't there at the same time, or maybe you were there at the same time, because I know I was there at the same time as my husband was, but I didn't meet him on that beach until, 20 years later, but he was at the same beach that I was at. There are these times when we're drawn together somehow. And I think this is really interesting that, the Saturn Venus, the guy goes to university here. And like you said, this guy comes from an incredibly rich family. He could have, gone to any university in the world that he wanted to go to. Where does he go? To her Venus Saturn line? You can't make that up. I mean, that's just crazy, right?
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the next. I know we've got to move along here, but this is the most important part of this story. This is
crazy. And I'll go through these next two slides so we can focus on the third one better. But this is the rectified time of 4:40, and she moved to London and she did charity work for children. How Moon MC can we get with that? And that's also where she started having a bit more of a spiritual change. Now, let's remember that she does have this is her relocated chart, by the way, to London. But in her natal chart, she does have her Neptune in the 7th house. She's seeking a spiritual partner, but spirituality is going to factor in very much. And maybe you could make a case to say, well, she's close enough to her moon line, and spirituality. Yeah. It just happened where she fell in, she got acquainted with Islam there. And those people were from Saudi Arabia, where that Neptune line is. But really, let's look at the rectified chart with ACG, because this gets even nicer. The moon line over London's even better. What did she like about London, besides the fact that she was doing the charity and enjoying that? Is she said she was left alone. She was in peace. She's a Cancer, and the moon is her ruling planet of her chart. And I believe it was like a waning crescent moon. She doesn't want to be seen. She wants to be hidden as much as she can. Not necessarily, you know what I mean? But she doesn't want to be bothered the way she was in the United States. And, it does move that Neptune line away, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when we go into the next slide, which is, moving to the next slide. Here we go. Yeah. So remember, we talked about how she met some people from Saudi Arabia, and there were rumors that she might have converted to Islam. And one of the things is she was holding a Quran. She went back to the United States, where there were all the paparazzi there. And she was angry. She was like fiery in this interview where she was saying, I got crucified for holding a Quran. And she's like, am I not allowed to read a book? And, it was like she had this passion. But what's really interesting is, the spirituality is the Neptune. Religion, though, is Jupiter. That's dogma. And it's a little bit more accurate when we look at her Jupiter line and her Neptune line that's framing Saudi Arabia there. And I put the marker over, well, it's closer to Mecca, because when you get more acquainted, if there's rumors that she's converted, there's no, she never confirmed or denied it. So speculation, my Sag moon has the opinion that is between her and God, but we want to talk about it with the astrocartography because we could kind of see that there's some kind of spiritual sense of her not being repulsed by it, maybe being attracted by it. What the other interesting thing with this rectified using astrocartography chart is she moved to the UAE, and everybody's like, why? And of course, there was more rumors about the Islam or whatever. Again, none of our business. That's between her and God. But what she told people is that I feel reset there. I feel aligned. Well, she's aligned now with her sun line, her Cancer. And it's not just the sun line, it's the sun in zenith. This line over here is the ecliptic, the sun's there. She's within orb of that sun at the most potent form she could receive. And it was in this location that she met a man that she's looking for a partner. Where was he born? He was born in Kuwait City, Kuwait, nearby her Neptune line, the spiritual partner. She saw him in a restaurant, and she walked up to him. Imagine this is tied in with Neptune. She said, "You look familiar to me. Don't I know you?" And he's like, "No, who?" And they started talking for 6 hours. Well, she did most of the talking, she said. And she talked and talked, and he listened. And she, at the end of this, she said, I think I'm going to know you forever. This is the first time in my life that I've been able to talk to somebody like this. Guess what? He's a Gemini, her rising sign.
Yeah.
It gets even wilder than that. In America, we have the melting pot. No matter what country you're from, you kind of assimilate and you become the American culture, or you don't become that, but you acquiesce to the American culture. In Kuwait, it's a mixed salad. The tomato is not going to confuse itself with being a cucumber or a lettuce or anything. So his identity of his heritage is very important. He happens to be Jordanian, from Amman, Jordan, his family. And what does the astrocartography say about that? Kabam. He is right from our Jupiter descendant line.
Yeah.
He's a billionaire, this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like, if we mix the two of Neptune and Jupiter, this goes beyond her net worth is 500,000, and now she's in the billionaires club with her husband.
And look at how powerful that Jupiter is in her chart. That Jupiter's, it's got some oomph. So yes, it's at the apex of that T square, but that, a square can be a call to action. The Jupiter's calling her to action, and it's got some power to help her do that. And finding that spiritual partner would be important. The Neptune is ruled by the Saturn, ruled by that Jupiter. So it's a pretty awesome thing that she's been able to follow the light, where she is best suited and where she can be happy. She has a wonderful moon in Taurus that wants to be taken care of. It expects to be taken care of. Not that it's weak. It's not a weak moon at all. It just knows that it's worthy of being taken care of. And of course, in the culture that she has gone into, he would be taking care of her incredibly so. But just thinking about the culture that she has gone into, there, even for him and her to have been attracted, she's this bad girl from America. There would have had to have been some sort of spiritual connection between the two of them for him to have risked that, taking her back to his family, getting family approval. She would have had to say, yes, that's not who I am. I'm not that bad girl. I'm more than that. And, I found my spiritual partner, my spiritual love. And, I think you said that there was a statement that they had accepted her quite well.
Oh, that's the thing, is that, she's under a sun line, and the sun shines light. You can't have secrets under a sun line. So in those families, before you could get into them, these mega rich families, they vet you and they have to watch you and they have to, make sure. But one of the things she mentioned is that they not only accepted her, they embraced her. Well, who loves hugs more than a Cancer or her Taurus moon? She's going to be very loyal to the sky too. That's actually more in her nature. You kind of have to wonder if her wild child days were more of her acting out instead of actually being herself. And
that the Uranus where she's birthed, that was the rebel, but now she's utilizing that energy, more as as her genius. She's doing it actually in a very creative way. So
she refers to her husband as incredibly chill. Neptune is going to bring you a lot of chill, a lot of calmness. And, if we're using some more of her travels to confirm her astrocartography, one of the things that she talked about was the charity work that she did in Turkey and Syria. So this was around the border of Turkey and Syria. And again, these are key words, and you listen to interviews. When you do an astrocartography reading with somebody, you have a dialogue with that client. You don't just pull from thin air. I'm someone who is a psychic who could do those readings, but I always have to have, when I'm doing specifically any kind of astromapping reading, that dialogue is there. So I'm listening to her, and she's talking about her experience in that area of Turkey, nearby Syria. It was a bunch of refugees from Syria, and she went up to one woman and said, "Your headscarf looks really beautiful." And that woman, she only has 2 headscarves. So that's what she owns as a refugee. You lose everything, right? Took it off and put it on Lindsay and said, "It looks more beautiful on you." Lindsay said, these are her key words. She was honored at the generosity. Honor and generousness are very Jupiter words. And it was somebody else who did that for her, Jupiter on her descendant. This is one of the ways of how you rectify the astrocartography there. So very, very fascinating. And
Absolutely.
What's really interesting is I wonder sometimes about Hollywood and Cancer celebrities because, Lindsay Lohan, Jessica Simpson, Ariana Grande, Princess Diana. I mean, she's not Hollywood, but, she's out there. Sometimes, or Elon Musk even, sometimes the spotlight is not really always the best place for them. Now, there are, of course, some that were like Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks, Margot Robbie, Kevin Bacon, that really did very well, but that's something to think of. But here she is right before she's giving birth, and it's a maritime type of theme, which is so appropriate for a Cancer. And look, her sun is so prominent in this photo, and even she's going to have the sun MC over her baby's bed. I don't know if she intended this or not. Sun is masculine, so she's found a man there, and she had a boy. I'm not saying if you go to a sun line, you're going to give birth to a boy, or if you can, that's not the way to, but interesting, all the energy that's just come into alignment there.
Yeah. Beautiful. And yeah, I mean, the Cancer sun, you couldn't paint a better picture to depict that. It's just absolutely beautiful.
Oh, and she has her Venus in Leo. So she always has that gorgeous hair. I mean, that's so Venus in Leo.
Yeah.
But we're going to move on to talking. We just beat up Pluto, right? With Arron Rodgers, but we're going to show you that Pluto, Mars, and Saturn are not always bad. Here is a client that I had, and he's, well, it was just get the cat out of the bag. What he does for a living is that he's a paranormal researcher, and he broadcasts it. So he moved to his area where he has Pluto and Saturn framing him, and there's some kind of Mars type of influence there, which plays into the story as well. And it's doing really well. I mean, it's slowly but surely growing, the Saturn MC. So Tamira, you really looked more into this chart as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting chart. And, this is the idea that, it's all in skilled and unskilled behavior. How can we move someone to a skilled level of being? And this is a powerhouse. I mean, you know, there's a mutual reception between Venus and the sun. And it's not a really strong mutual reception because they can't see each other, but you know, they're going to know each other are there. I almost feel like this Venus is trying to pull the sun out of the darkness of the 12th house, you know, pull it up into the top of the chart. So there's this relationship, but you know, wherever that sun goes, that Pluto goes as well. The Mars goes, the Mercury goes. It's a stellium. It's all ruled by that Venus. So it's super powerful. Now we do have to obviously look at the whole chart. We've got Jupiter in Sagittarius. You've got a absolutely beautiful moon in Taurus there as well. And that's really super important for someone who is going to have such an intense solar energy that he's going to deal with. And it is in the 12th house, you know, so let's look at where he's from and what kind of lines we're looking at. So we can, oh,
sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, there he is on it. What city was it again? It's
Madison, Wisconsin.
So you're looking at right on that Uranus line. So the Uranus line is on the ascendant. He's from a tiny town. He's got big ideas. He's got this genius level of expression. He's got this super intensity, and there's a whole bunch of secrets, you know, and it's secrets that he is actually holding that he thinks he has, but everyone else can see. It's 12th house, you know, it's this really difficult expression of energy. I actually was sort of running through some of his energy. I mean, he's got that cardinal air as his foundational energy. So, you know, that's kind of how he's going to behave. The mutual reception. The Saturn is in Gemini, which kind of gives that organizing of thoughts, communication, sort of that practical application. And, you know, that Uranus on the ascendant at his hometown, it brings out of the box thinking. And is he living in an out of a box way? I don't know. I mean, I've never lived in Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin. Probably not. You know, it's probably pretty boxed in. And he probably felt very suppressed in expressing his own energy.
And he was so lonely there, and he was looking for a partner. And
that moon, I mean, what a lovely moon in the 7th, you know, his expression of who he's going to draw towards himself. He needs that love. He must have that love, that support. Again, that sense of I'm going to be taken care of no matter what. I'm going to be loved. I'm going to create these beautiful memories. But, you know, is he going to find it where he is? Well, that's the question. He didn't. He found it somewhere else.
And is it any surprise that he finds the man of his dreams that's close proximity to his Mars line? I mean, male Mars, I mean, that really fits in.
So he's living in the Seattle area. He's got both the Mars and the Pluto and the sun, you know, showing up there. Now, you know, as an astrocartographer, we're not necessarily going to say to somebody, hey, move to your Mars line. That'll be good for you. You know, it's like, you know, how is he dealing with the Mars, the Pluto, the sun? You know, how is he expressing in that? How skilled is he with utilizing that energy? Well, he actually has done a really great job, and he naturally went out. He went towards that Pluto Mars line, you know, innately knowing that he was going to be able to, you know, do something out there, that was where he belonged. Now, you have to think that if somebody has this Pluto-Sun connection, and Mars as well, that they're not for the faint of heart. So, you know, somebody who's maybe all soft, beautiful energy, you're not going to say, hey, go to your Mars line or go to your Pluto line and experience this real hard energy. You know, because they're not built to take that. Maybe that's, you know, not what they're able to express in a positive way. But somebody who's built like this just innately knew he needed to go out there and be able to express that Pluto. He couldn't hide it under the 12th house any longer. You know, he needed to pull it down into the physical body. Well, what does he do for a living?
He's a paranormal investigator and a broadcaster of paranormal news.
I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. It's like, wow,
He goes to
and
graveyards to do the
and he goes
paranormal
to graveyards.
investigations, which is the Saturn, right? It's also Pluto, the death. And, one of the things too that we have to mention, everybody, is that there are exceptions to Pluto lines as far
Yes.
as when you could recommend for somebody to move there. He has one of those exceptions, and that is that Pluto is conjunct his sun in his natal chart. So if Pluto is on an angle, any angle in your natal chart, or if it's conjunct the sun, particularly the sun, not the moon, not any other planet, they will be able to very successfully handle their Pluto lines as long as they manage it under the right manifestation. Any other place, it's going to be, oh my God, it's going to be trial. It's going to be traumatic.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Cindy, you've actually lived on Pluto lines and are very familiar with how it breaks down your life and asks you to rebuild it. And actually, he probably did, coming from where he came from, he would have had to have let go of every idea he had about what his life was going to look like and rebuild, in this area on that Pluto. Now, he probably still, I'm sure he's a very intense fella. I'm sure that, running around in graveyards and broadcasting, what ghosts are out and about tonight, you're not for the faint of heart doing that kind of work. So what a great expression. Now, would we recommend, why don't you become a paranormal investigator and broadcaster? It probably, unless you're talking to him and you're seeing what his interests are and, how is he using this genius? I mean, I think he was into computers prior to this, or still is into computers at some level. So, he has this edge to himself on the what probably helps him with his paranormal activity, all the equipment he needs to run to be able to detect these ghosts and whatnot. So it's a match made in heaven, but it's a very intense situation. Did you want to go to the next slide and we can just take a quick look as we're starting to wrap up here? So this is one, and actually he has been to a couple of places that we were looking at that really spoke to what he was doing, on some of these lines. And this is a place he loves to go. This little triangle here that we can see with the Neptune local space, that's bringing those lines in that I love to use, which are the lines that you're putting out from birth. It's these lines that you have created across the earth that you exude, that come out of you. And this is his Neptune line. And also the Mars line here, the red line going straight up and down, that is his ACG line. So in between that triangle is where he loves to go into graveyards and transmit information about stars and, different things like that. One of the things actually he is lacking in water, which I was looking at his chart and I thought, wow, he's lacking in water. He's he's got I think he's got, doesn't he have his midheaven is in water. And that's it. That's all he has is midheaven Cancer in his natal chart. But yet he's moved to water. He's surrounded by water as he's doing this work that he's doing. So I thought that was really interesting that he has brought that up as a south node that actually is in Cancer. So, that's really interesting. It's interesting that he's got this Pluto energy coming 174 miles to Pluto. We actually do consider that, close enough to have an impact as well. So he's still got that Plutonian energy that he's carrying around with him on the whole West Coast there that he's transmitting with. And, the one thing about having one of these big collective planets, whether it's Neptune or Pluto or Uranus, that, you have to be egoless in a sense in how you're using it. You can't be full of ego, because if you're full of ego, then it's controlling, there's a control factor there. You're trying to control this energy that is greater than you, it's collective energy. So he would have to let go of that ego. He would have to just have fun with what he's doing, enjoy what he's doing, and do it for the greater good. And here he is, his moon moves to the 8th house, which is showing that death and beyond the veil kind of thing. And it's a powerful moon. It's not a weak moon. He's not afraid of the ghosts that he sees. He probably loves those ghosts that he sees and loves all the, goosebumps going on his body when he's in contact. And also, here's that 29-degree Jupiter, the do or die. What really makes that Jupiter super powerful in the chart there. So,
and it's not only 29, it's 29 degrees and 59 minutes.
59 minutes, yeah, for sure.
But what he goes down there for is to look, this is Jupiter. So he looks at the glamorous side of things. This is Jupiter underground. He goes to the celebrity graveyards and he talks in his broadcast about how you have to go between these buildings, under this valley, between this stairways, up and down and winding. I mean, he goes into such detail. That's his Mercury and his Saturn talking. But to do what? To see these celebrities underground in this area in Southern California. He likes to stay on the West Coast to do his investigations.
Yeah, I think we have another chart that I wanted to. Did we have another one? Yeah. So here we are in Las Vegas, and this is another interesting situation where we've got the Vegas Neptune Jupiter Neptune information going on. And I wanted to know, what goes on in Vegas for this guy. Like, does he go to Vegas? What happens to him in Vegas? And what did he say, Cindy?
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yeah, for him, absolutely. Absolutely. I actually was pulling his map out and I was looking, where else would I send this guy? And he's going to want to have this intensity. Yeah, here's another one actually before I finish that sentence. This Fernley is right on his Pluto Mars. And I just had found this place and I thought, wow. And then you've got like Sun Valley right there. There's a whole bunch of little towns named after planets there. It's kind of really a cool little section. And, this tells the story. Now, would you tell him to go there? Not necessarily. He doesn't really have to visit the place to experience it. But this is a military sanctuary, we'll call it, and where that little red dot is the graveyard. And so military, the Mars, Pluto, the death beyond death, the collective death. So sometimes it tells the story. It doesn't mean that you have to go there to experience it, but you can look across the map and let the story unfold and tell you, how the depth of how these planets can act. And the other place I was looking at, I was thinking to myself, I don't think we have a picture of it, but we can talk about it anyways, was that he has a Venus moon through actually where I am, the Maritimes, and that moon line runs down to Panama. Yeah. It goes through Cuba and it goes to Panama. And I thought, well, if he ever wants to go for a vacation, he either needs to come out to the Maritimes and visit us out here, go down to Cuba, or go down to Panama and have a vacation, because that moon line is going to be a beautiful moon for him. He can take his partner down there and just relax and make some good memories and kind of like decompress from all that Plutonian energy that he's carrying around. The Pluto, Saturn, Mars that he's carrying around on a day-to-day basis. So that was my thought for him was, hey, where can we send him that's going to be, a nice little place to decompress?
But here's the irony too, is that we looked at this area of Fernley because his Pluto astrocartography line and his Pluto local space line and the Mars line, that's a lot of energy there. This line, by the way, is the state border, so don't worry about that. But I asked him, did you ever go to the cemetery in Fernley, Nevada? And he said, funny you should ask. I was on my way there and I got a flat tire. How uncanny is that with Mars? Jim Lewis used to talk about his Mars line being his flat tire zone.
Flat tire. And so the guy never makes it there. And maybe now that we've spoken about it, he probably will try to get there again. Maybe he'll have somebody else drive this time instead of himself. Yeah. So, what do you say when someone says they're going to their Mars Pluto line? You say, carry a spare tire.
Yeah, for sure.
Make sure you have a spare tire.
So just in case you guys wanted to know, a recap, we used Meteor Cosmo maps with Arron Rodgers example. We used Astro locality maps from Astro Gold for Mac, for Lindsay Lohan, and we used matrix horizons from Sirius for that last example with the Pluto, Saturn, Mars.
Yeah.
Remote activation magic using in our beginners class. You know, I can't make this up. I mean, how magical, you know, someone found their new best friend forever in our class doing remote activation. People that were stuck on their Neptune or their Saturn lines that felt like things were hopeless and they did the remote activation remediation. They were like, thank you. You took me out of my location. So there is so much camaraderie that starts to form in the class, much more understanding of how this astrocartography works. Remote activation, by the way, operates on the principle that you don't have to physically be somewhere. You don't have to be at that location in order to experience the effects of your astrology, your astrocartography line or remote local space line associated with that place. It ties in with the law of attraction and manifestation. It's a form of remediation. We had one person who she couldn't find anybody that she wanted to remote activate with because her goal was to emphasize her Venus, and that landed somewhere in her oceans. But you know, what was really interesting is a lot of people wanted to remote activate with her because she was living in Portugal and she had a lot of people had Mercury lines going through there or sun lines or something that they wanted to activate. So it's interesting of maybe you're looking at one direction and someone else is coming towards you, and the connections, the synergy that happens. So it's a form of remediation.
So much fun, that class. It's a very creative class. When you get into astromapping, it's a technique that requires creativity. And I mean, of course, that creativity is whatever you bring to the table as a creative astrologer. But it can be a lot of fun. You know, a lot of like my local space class is the same way. It's a very creative part of astrology, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, it was a great, and the activity, everyone contributed, and you know, they get to do some work that we all get to look at, so it's really wonderful.
Speaking of remote activation, if you want to participate, we have a Facebook community that it's not a Kepler group, but it's a Kepler sponsored group. It's a safe place where you want to go, and there's a link. I think Misty will put the link in the chat for that. And we also have, exclusive to KeplerCollege students, an AstroMapping community on WhatsApp. So if you're a current student or a former student, you get access. We don't let anybody else come in because, you know, we like to keep it secure and everything. And WhatsApp, there's a lot of thread drift that goes on, the conversations every now and then. I don't really participate in it. I might throw a meme that's conversational to get things started, but you'll enjoy what you see there. It's a lot more active and a lot more chatty in general. You can't really chat so easily on Facebook outside of like on the discussion forum or the page, but you could, I know they have a little chat and community chats, but you could do this. It's a lot easier, a lot more people in the internationality of it. No obligation to join either. And if you don't join, you don't lose out, but I'm just saying, there it is. Really important. Our AstroMapping Certificate academic calendar. Tamira, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. You know, we wanted to bring together, like, astromapping is sort of hit the market. You know, everybody's talking about it. They're really, it's in vogue again. It you know, was in vogue and then it went out of vogue, and now we've got a whole group of new astromappers that want to understand this new tool. So we wanted to develop an astromapping certificate that had some depth to it, so that you're not just surface, you know, skimming over the surface of what astromapping really can do. So this is what we're at so far. We are still developing this certificate. We're still working, you know, classes into it and going deeper and deeper in what we're offering. Now in the summer, we've got our 2 classes. In the fall, we've got a remedial measure class. We've got astromapping for beginners. And then hitting winter, we have a full lineup here for you guys. So you can take a look at that. And you can see our lineup of teachers that come with this astromapping certificate. There's lots of knowledge here that are all working astromappers and all very passionate about the subject.
By the way, Ariel Gutman and Karen McCauley, and I think Maya White directly knew Jim Lewis.
They were all trained by Jim himself. And that's really important that we continue to tap into that history and that knowledge. And, you know, Ariel Gutman and Maya, both Ariel and Maya are still active in, you know, doing astrology for the general public kind of thing as well. So and I know Ariel has quite a bit of research that she's bringing to the table as well. We're really excited about Ariel coming to the certificate. Maya is an incredible astromapper, a very beautiful person, and has a great class as well. And Ralph, you know, in his geodetics, he brings lots of history and politics and, you know, different world events to the table and shows us how to look at them across the map as well.
Well, thanks, guys. It's been groovy. I know we went a little bit over our time because we just love this so much, but we're open to any kind of questions. And I mean, I have more time to stay on if anybody has anything to ask or anything to say.
There's a lot of questions, so I'm glad that you can stay and answer. And look at all the love, all the emojis. I don't know if you can see them.
Thank you. Yes.
Stop my share right now, so I could probably try to see.
All right. So I know that some of you in the audience may have to go, but don't worry, we're going to get all of this on the recording and we will have it posted on our YouTube channel later this week so you can catch anything that you miss. Okay, are you ready? We have lots of questions.
Yes, we're ready.
Okay. Now I know you already put a slide up that listed the software programs you use today. Are there any other programs or apps that you would recommend for astrocartography?
So programs, if you have a PC, SolarFire is amazing. Matrix Horizons. So SolarFire, yeah, that has their solar maps. And it has a lot of bells and whistles that you could use, but you need a PC. You could use something like Parallels or VirtualBox on a Mac. I personally have a Mac and a PC, and I don't want to put VirtualBox on my Mac or anything like that. So, but that's a solution for it. And the same thing for Sirius. David Cochran has his own astrolocality software, but he also incorporated Matrix Horizons into it. And it's Matrix Horizons. I love it. I just love it. And on a Mac, AstroGold for Macs. Yeah. There's time passages. They have a map too, but it's nothing as robust as the one in AstroGold. And then there's Meteor that could work on any device. Those are the top that are around. You could go to astro.com to get your free chart that way. And yeah, I mean, play around with astro.com first before you commit. We need to do a software, the highlights. And as far as apps are concerned, not yet. I do know that AstroGold has like an addition, or I forgot what you call it, but something that you pay an extra $39.99 and you could get like a maps feature. But they're still evolving it or developing it. And you can use on your phone or any small device Meteor, and it's a web-based app, but it's not a phone app yet. We're going to develop it into an Android app that actually integrates into Google Maps. So as you're driving, you could actually have that as an extra layer, and it would be like, ping, you're getting an orb of your Pluto line, ping, you're under your Pluto, ping, you're out of your Pluto line. So that's under development. What other questions do we have?
Thank you. A few people have asked about what is remote activation, and then some others asked, will we learn that in the course?
We'll learn.
Yes. You will learn it in the course in the beginner class. And remote activation is bringing focus to one of your lines that you want to amplify. Of course, a line is a part of yourself. It's part of who you are. And so you're bringing that self to an angle so that it amplifies, and you experience that, and you kind of bring that home to you and work with it. So, I mean, it could be clients, it could be, you're connecting to what is there, what is on this line. Is there a city? What's in that city? Is it something I connect to? Can I go visit it? Can I remote in through my computer, pictures, however you want to do that. So we teach that in the class.
Great. Now, this question is about mundane astrology. So this example given is the Israel-Hamas event happening in the world. So I guess the question is, do you use astrocartography, astromapping of events and mundane astrology like natal astrology?
When the boat that crashed into that bridge in Baltimore happened, the iron, you can't make it up. The mundane astrocartography had Mercury on the MC. The whole world saw it, and it was, sorry, not Mercury, Mars on the MC, and it was Mars and Libra. And isn't that bridge kind of shaped like the Libra glyph? Bam! So yeah, we do use it. And Ralph McIntyre also showed us how when Jupiter and Uranus lines were over Isfahan in Iran, which is the uranium mines, where there was an imminent threat of either being attacked or things that did get where the attacks could strive from, but that's where they were building their atomic bombs of all things, right? So, or atomic missiles. So I think they did get struck nearby there, by the way. So yes, definitely you could do that with the mundane events in astrocartography.
Thank you. This question is about when you would use in Mundo versus Zodical.
I don't use Zodical. It's just, when I moved to so the Kansas City is where my Pluto line is nearby, and happens to be near my husband's Pluto line, his ascendant Pluto line. And the astrocartographer and I knew a little bit of astrocartography. He was insisting it's not there because he was using Zodical, and I was insisting it was. And he turned out to be kind of from that area, but no, I mean, that was totally a whole Pluto experience. Oh, I'm going to do a series with Callum on every planetary line, and I'm going to discuss the Pluto experience there. But it was just so textbook. You cannot make it up for me or my husband. So go buy in Mundo, people. Please do.
Okay. And then there was a second part of that question. Is it comparable to true node versus mean node, or are they just very, very different?
I think we use true node because we look at where it is in space and projects onto the Earth. So we don't take an average, we take the actuality.
Okay. Oh, we've already answered that question. There's a few people who asked about software. Okay. Oh, this is one that more than a few people asked. And I think there's some confusion that you can clear up because they're asking about house systems.
Oh, yeah.
So
house system for your radial chart doesn't matter. You could use whatever you want because it doesn't change where the planets are in space. The house system is you and looking at your perspective. So any house system that you're comfortable with, please use it. A lot of people now want to use whole signs. That's the most in vogue. Kepler uses whole signs a lot, but they also use Placidus. I happen to use Coke a lot. I would say try to become bilingual or trilingual or whatever with when it comes to like using your house systems. But with the astrocartography, it doesn't matter.
Because it's the angles that you're really looking at. And
yeah,
we're looking at
angles are the same. Yeah, the angles are the same no matter what you use. It doesn't matter if you're using whole sign or Coke or Placidus, the angles are always the same. And that's the beauty of astrology. And, really what you're using your house system for is delineation. You still need to know how to delineate the chart. The astromap doesn't delineate the chart. You need to know what the sun is giving you. You need to know what tools the sun has and how, and the backdrop that it's working in. But astromapping is universal throughout the house systems.
Thank you. This question is about if you're going to relocate 40 to 100 miles from your current place, how would you use astrocartography? Would you use astrocartography?
Well, you may or may not, depending on, if you have any lines that are like, within range of that, but really that's local space. So that's you projecting your lines out. So you would use local space mostly. And then, it would depend on if you had an actual angle that you were connecting to as well.
Yeah, if they were 40 to 100 miles away from an angle, that's pretty close. But we also have, orbs are so different. I teach to that in the beginner class, by the way, how orbs are different according to the planet, according to the phase of the planet, if it's an apogee or perigee, how prominent it is in the chart. So there's no real golden rule there, but Jim Lewis, he even went back and forth with orbs, but he says like no more than 350 miles away, east or west of your line. I sometimes even put it tighter if it's a faraway planet or if it's an asteroid. So it would still have an influence to whoever asked that question.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to ask one out of order. I just saw something.
Oh, and it's a more intense influence the closer you are under the line, just so you know.
Right. And the question was, what if you don't live anywhere near a line?
Perfect. That's fine too. I think you could be yourself a whole lot more without interference that gets in your way or facilitates what you're trying to aspire towards your goal. So absolutely fine. And you could always remote activate.
Yes. Okay. This is a question about sect. And if you factor that into astrocartography,
if that is the astrology you use, then you go ahead and use it. Yes, you can use whatever you use to delineate. This, astrocartography is universal. It doesn't have a set of rules about delineation. It just has a set of rules about how things are activated.
So what you're saying is first know your chart and then go to the astrocartography.
Exactly, Lori.
I've taken the class, so yes, it's such a great class. I can't say enough good things. Okay, this is a question about the first chart. Will Rodgers be able to put in a year on the jets? So it's not really, I think the real question here is, can you use astrocartography to answer a question like that?
Yeah, with the transits and progressions, yes.
Yep. Which is a whole sort of deeper level to what we showed you. Yes.
And so this question, I think, needs some clarification on what the zenith is, because the question is if there's any significant meaning to having all the zeniths in inaccessible places. I think that's two questions. So when you have, the lines that you want to move to in places that you don't want to move to, but then the zenith, I think what you're referring to are the four angles. I don't know that that's the right use of zenith, but you guys can answer that question.
The zenith is only from the midheaven line. That's because you have to see when the planet is at the highest point in the sky. So that would be anywhere, it's 90 degrees with a 2-degree orb. So you could go down to 88 degrees. It won't go to 92 because then, you're going towards the other side of the world. But it's on the ecliptic, the sun's apparent path across our Earth. And if you can't get to your zenith line anywhere, then you can't get to your zenith line anywhere. I've personally been to 2 zenith lines and they are absolutely so powerful. I highly recommend them if that lines up with your goals. But it's directly overhead. It's not like, because the MC is the highest point that the sun is in the sky, but it doesn't mean that it's 90 degrees above your head. And we could just look at the difference between the MC in December versus, this December 21st versus June 21st, where it's going to be higher up from the horizon, but it's not 90 degrees unless you're on that ecliptic. I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify that the zenith is just the one line, not all four of the lines.
Yes.
In terms of relocated charts, do they ever become more important than the natal chart?
You know how
No,
the way I describe it is that, say you're born a brunette and you dye your hair blonde, and for all essential purposes, you're living the life of a blonde. You have the fun of a blonde. Blondes have more fun, blah, 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 but you're truly a brunette. When your hair grows in, it's going to grow in brunette. So it doesn't change, your essential nature. When you relocate, you'll acquiesce, but you are who you are, period. But we look at it for the insights to see how the planets shift, how the ascendance shifts, the midheaven, of course, and how some of those planets change their connections to the angles.
And I mean, if you are amplifying one of your planets and you're not natally born with that blueprint, you do want to be cautious. You don't want to run into the fire. You want to you want to be able to delineate how is that going to play out in my life if I amplify that energy. So, not all Venus lines are created equally. So you don't just send somebody to their Venus line just because it's Venus or Jupiter. So, that's kind of the deal. But the natal chart is always the original blueprint, the original idea. And then this is just kind of versions of yourself as you amplify different energies of yourself. And we kind of do that anyways in our own behavior in our day-to-day. Sometimes Mars is amplified, but this is like going and, purposely amplifying that energy. And if the planet is badly behaved, then you're going to be badly behaved. When you move to that line, it doesn't fix everything.
Okay, last couple of questions. I know there's so many, there's 35, and we really can't get to them all. So we're just going to do a couple more.
Sorry, guys.
The ACG lines and the local space lines. The question is if one set of lines is stronger than the other.
ACG
They're
lines.
just different. Oh, sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
Oh, ACG lines are on angles. So your angles are like the socket and the planets are the plug. They're a lot more stronger. But Tamira, point.
But they're different. They're two different parts. It's two different tools. So for me, let's say, you have to move to a place because your husband works there or your wife works there, and the whole family has to move. And maybe somebody's like moving to a line that is like badly behaved in their, in their makeup, like they're, especially little kids, they're learning to rein it in and use that energy, adults as well. The local space lines can become very personal. It becomes a compass. So we can actually work with those lines in directions, the northeast, west, south. So it's a different way of using the lines and amplifying or de-amplifying energy in the chart.
And a lot of it too works with intention a whole lot more with the local space lines, whereas in astrocartography, it's the external factors coming down on you more so.
Okay. This is a question about the class. Do you get into parens deeply in the beginners class? I know we didn't talk about them today, but somebody's asking.
We don't. That's more advanced. It's in the core. I mean, we obviously mention them, and I think you mentioned them in the beginners class in the first week or so. But it's not. That's an advanced technique that you learn later on.
Okay, wonderful. So this will be our last question. Are either of you writing books on the topic, or do you have any books that you want to recommend?
Tamira?
Cindy. That is on our hit list. Yes, you will see something from us in the future together. Actually, we've got some stuff that we're working on. Books to recommend. It's pretty tough right now. I don't know, Cindy. Like some of the books are out of print too. you
Jim
know.
Lewis's The Psychology of Astrocartography.
But some of that, like some of his books are out of print, so it
Mm.
is tough. And I that's really one of the reasons why the certificate was birthed, because we know that that the books are hard to get, and to really somebody said they'll pre-order.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll let you know when that hits the market. But yeah, there it is. I mean, there are Jim Lewis, there's Martin Davis, there's Steve Cozy. There's books out there, but they are a little bit tough to get, and I don't want you to be frustrated trying to get them.
Okay, wonderful. I'm trying to answer a question, but I think I'll just answer it here because we're going to wrap up. So the question was on the course. And a few of you have asked about taking more than one course at Kepler. You can take more than one. We do like to let you all know that there is academic rigor at Kepler. And if it's your first time taking a course with us, you might want to start with one just to see what it's like, because you may find that you have to study and do homework and attend the class, and it could be 5 hours or more a week. And, of course, it depends on your availability, but I would just recommend if it's your first class with us, start with one, then you'll know how much you can actually do, how much time you will have to spend. And then the next term, if you feel like you can do two, then do two. But we want you to succeed. So I think it's better to start with one and do that one really well, like learn all that material. So I hope that answers the question. And we do have a page up on the KeplerCollege website about the AstroMapping Certificate. So you can definitely go there. You can see the courses where Tamira and Cindy are still developing courses. You're going to see this certificate program grow, and we're really excited about it. So feel free to reach out if you have questions. You can contact us, info@keplercollege.org, or you can contact me, Lori, at keplercollege.org. I also get the marketing emails. So feel free to let us know if you have questions. We definitely want to help you. We also have open houses every term where you can show up and ask all kinds of questions like this. We already had the one for the summer term. It is posted on YouTube. You can watch that. But we will have another one coming up in September. I don't have the date yet, but we will have an open house. So we can answer all of your questions. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today and staying a little bit late with us, but this is such a popular topic, and I know that Tamira and Cindy love talking about it. So thanks to you, Cindy and Tamira, for a wonderful presentation. And I want to thank Mary and Misty for hanging out in the chat box and answering questions and putting links in there. And I'm your host, Lori, and I will see you again at another webinar in the not too distant future. So thank you again. Bye, everyone.
Bye.